Joe, really thank you for having our panel here. We're really glad to join this conference. Hello, everybody in the audience from around the world, and also to the IAFOR planning team. Thank you so much for everything you are doing and the quick work behind the scenes to keep everything afloat. I think this is definitely something where we all share as well as the on and off screen moments we're experiencing these days. Very excited to introduce the panel to you all. Joe, I'm actually following your lead on this. I'm going to pull up the program. I hope everybody can see the screen. We are each going to be running our own presentation for the panel, so there will be a couple different formats that you'll see. But this is part of what we're showcasing also is really the individuality of both the faculty and the work that we ask our students to do and respond to. I'll do a little introduction in a moment about some of my approach and the work that I've done and how I see and think about teaching and learning in art and design, and really specifically around this idea of embracing difference. And then I'll be followed by Joshua Holzmann, who is a faculty member in Integrated Studies, one of our departments, and Fine Art another, and also part of the administrative group in the Integrated Studies department. Joshua is going to give us a case study that looks at how embracing diversity of process and thought can achieve comparable learning outcomes among students from 6 distinct art and design majors. And he's going to do this using a compositional theory assignment and really sort of show us how the students have responded completely differently to this shared brief or this shared assignment. Following Joshua will be David Tillinghast, who is a faculty member in illustration, a track leader for illustration also, so heads one of the groups, illustration design in the department, and is also director of special projects in the department with a focus on assessment and professional preparation, which is a big part of what we do in the school as well, and something a lot of us will touch on, I think. Following David will be Wendee Lee, who is faculty in the product design department, with a deep focus on student learning resources, support, student success, and also a partner in the assessment work we do in the college. Wendee Lee is going to talk about how the individual design process is revealed through project journey maps. And this is in a portfolio-based class. And then lastly is Armando Zuniga, who's a faculty member, in Humanities and Sciences, the director of our English language learning area, and also the director of our Writing Center, a key component in our student support framework. This is from the program, so I just wanted to give you all a chance to open the program if you haven't looked at it already and read into the bios. Our faculty come with deep experience in teaching and learning, and also a deep professional practice in art and design in their specific field. So it's something that again, we'll all be touching on in little bits and pieces. So again, thank you to the panel for being here. Thank you to Joe and the IAFOR team for having us. My presentation, my opening piece is really just a framing. I would sort of refer to as a moment to frame the idea of structures for teaching around a concept that I refer to as parameters for creativity. This is a type of teaching that is often referred to or starts in terms of project and problem-based learning, and active teaching and learning are some of the keywords obviously associated with this. But what I want to talk about a little bit is how this works in and across a term, a semester, in a way that creates space inside the projects, inside the assignments, where the students have to put themselves into the work, create and produce in a way that is both meets the expectations and often the professional expectations of the faculty, as well as something that carries the student voice. The typical places we would think about beginning a class, or the framing areas for a class shared by many of us, are the learning outcomes, the course learning outcomes. Really just the big questions: what do we want our students to learn, know, understand, experience, be aware of, be able to do? And obviously at the end of the class, how do we know that they know and are able to do these things, and to what degree? In my mind, this starts off in a very contained place, in a contained way, with the idea that once released into this project or projects, the students start moving in many directions which are really specific to their interests. And it's between these two axes of what needs to be accomplished within the class from the college or the faculty or department's perspective, and what the student is bringing to that, where we see a creative production and a creative process emerging. These learning outcomes really become what I would refer to as the through lines for a course. So if we think about learning outcomes as framing structure, the through line is how they are established, taught, developed, and really reached by the end of the class. The way we really typically see this or think about it is in the form of a project. And then multiple projects often that can scaffold across a term, building and increasing with complexity until they reach a place where the student is really able to demonstrate their ability to actually produce or create or achieve something with or through the learning outcomes. We're not just looking for the student to demonstrate their understanding of these areas, but to actually own it. The key components of this, and these are some of the things the faculty members will talk about, and you'll see in ways how they may use similar terms of project brief or rubric, something like that, but how even in their specific case studies, the examples they'll offer, there's such an incredible range and variation in how people are teaching and how our students are really learning. Some of the key components inside this structure, so the skeleton, for example, if you will, is the project brief, which often carries these criteria, the learning outcomes, but transformed through a problem statement into criteria we expect the students to learn and respond to or work within. I think of these criteria really as what I'd refer to as parameters for creativity, meaning the criteria don't determine content necessarily, they actually frame the space of the assignment. They create a room, I like to think of, where we invite the students in across a period of time between these objectives, and we frame this space, create the room, open the door, and ask our students inside the space to hit these walls as hard as possible. The presence of the criteria, the walls, becomes these parameters for creativity, where the student knows what's expected, they know the timeline, and they know the objectives they have to meet inside the work, which I feel really allows them to not only put themselves into the work, into the space, but actually almost requires them to do so. They're also inside this space doesn't really exist this one right or wrong answer, which is something you will also see clearly from our faculty as they start to show you both their own process and examples of their work, of the students' work, sorry. So the project brief really contains these criteria. They become the elements that define the space, the parameters for creativity. And then through this space, the students, or inside the space, the students produce, and we're able to then give feedback specifically to what they are trying to do based on how well they're meeting those learning outcomes. Across the weeks, as the project develops, we see the work evolving, and where something may not have worked previously, we now see the students starting to move into areas where they're finding success. Faculty members are able to identify what I call the plus minus, you'll see them on the screen, the areas that are working and what's not, and then help the student develop an individual mindset, a growth mindset to begin to identify and solve these challenges specifically. The work across this sequence in this period of critique and feedback and formative or summative evaluation, formative evaluation as we move towards summative, it really shows marked progress and growth. And an additional key component, once the student reaches the final project or the way they wish to produce or show the work, another key component is how we evaluate it, which is based directly on the criteria. This is why I refer to these learning outcomes directly as through lines. The projects are framed based on these learning outcomes across the course, The project brief contains them. The critique is given throughout the term based on plus minus in relation to what's working. And at the end, it's evaluated objectively to the degree possible using a rubric, which is a transparent way of helping the students see what's working and what's not. For example, this specific student would actually be able to identify what they might want to work on next in the project if they were to carry it forward. Within our classes, these projects really sort of scaffold often in complexity, or they can be repeated projects in a way that focuses on process, which is one of the examples we'll hear in a little bit. The projects, as I said, often scaffold or build across the term. And another important aspect is as the student grows in their programs, and two of our faculty members teach inside on the panel today, teach in kind of sort of a midpoint, also a formative place in the program. So we'll hear a little bit about how they work with students in some of this middle space where the students actually begin to define the aspects of the project. In some ways, something early on, both in a program or in a course, may start off with very clear objectives and a tight space for the students to work and produce in. As the project scaffolds, you see two of the walls opening up, the students actually get an opportunity to often define that space more. We get to a final project sometimes and everything flips to getting to see what the students are able to do as they present and show us with their solutions, with their ideas, with their efforts in relation to that project or problem that we set out as faculty. Along the way, the role and the voice of the faculty member changes a little bit too, which is another point that I would love you all to pay attention to in the panel as we hear from the faculty is how they move often in relation to students from direct teaching, instruction, demos, things like that, to really working much more as a role of facilitator, guide, and then often a lot of our faculty do remain in mentor relationships with students as the students move into professional spaces. So not only within this framework do we see the actual spaces for the student to work and produce opening, but where the faculty's voice may be sort of fairly heavy and guiding or demonstrating and showing in the early term or in the early part of the course, the voice shifts as the student starts to define the aspects of the project until we reach this place where the faculty members really moved into a role as a more of a facilitator, I would say. I am very excited for you all to get a chance to see and hear from our faculty members what they do inside their classes. I've asked each of them to think about this as sort of a case study around their own teaching. What is so important and what I am always so in awe of is not just the level and the quality of the work our students produce, but how they uncover their own process, their own approach or methodology for their own creative production, how they do this in a space that meets personal and professional goals, and how they are able to learn how to accomplish and achieve in a way that they can repeat, not repeating the same work, but they develop a sense of process that they're able to then take into a space professionally and work to produce with. So with that, I am going to turn this over to our panel. And as I said, I am also just as excited as I hope many of you are to not only hear about how our faculty do this within art and design, but also if you think about this framework to recognize how this is something that many of you in your own classes and your own teaching may be able to think about moving or shifting into is through direct instruction to project and problem-based learning and into some of this more open creative space for production. Also a quick note, I believe in 2 days from now, there will be a workshop that Armando, one of our presenters, and myself will be running. So for those of you who are interested in how to actually create this framework and begin to populate it for yourself for your own class or for a topic that you're teaching, please do attend that workshop. And with that, I will turn this over to our next presenter, Joshua Holzmann from the Integrated Studies Department.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I hope you're all healthy and safe during this time. My name is Joshua Holtzman, as Sam just introduced me. I started teaching over 10 years ago, and a consistent problem that I've run into as an instructor is how to assess a diverse population of art and design students equitably. Art can be very subjective, and I wanted to think of a way to build out build out assignments that could accept and apply to any major that I would run into. So ArtCenter students apply and are accepted into their major. So there's not a typical foundation year that you would see at most art and design schools. So there's not a way to have a even skill of the population, so everybody doesn't come with the same type of drawing skills or the same ideas about color theory. So they come to me with different, very different types of skills and also different understandings of mediums. So for this discussion, I chose to look at the course I teach, Design 1, which is a first-term course for ArtCenter students. And it services students from advertising, fine art, graphic design, illustration, and interaction design. The course provides a solid foundation for basic principles that govern non-objective 2D and illusionary 3D space. Students use the fundamental organizational principles of design to create compelling visual forms based on critical evaluation of concepts. And my objective was that these assignments would, no matter where the student was coming from, whether they had, a year of art in high school or 4 years of art in high school, they could understand compositional theory and apply it in their own way. Some of my students never used paint before. Others use paint and never computer programs to make art. And Design 1 does that. It spans analog and digital media. So, and also once in a while, I get students who only use graphite and pencil, which would create kind of even more of a headache for myself, but I figured out a way to handle that. So to create an objective assessment of the understanding and application of compositional principles and theory, I made this assignment. The brief takes students through a way of designing 12 compositions of their own creative integrity and their own concept. And this is what I had them spend the majority of time on concept and thinking about something that they were passionate about, that they would want to research for the course of a term. At ArtCenter, our semesters are terms. Students could choose whether to work with color or only value in black and white. Students could choose what medium to work with. So if they had a facility for photography or paint or collage or dry medium, they could do that, as well as digital. The solution gave several benchmarks that were important for me. I wanted to see how the students could work with the one principle for each composition and how they could apply the Gestalt theory or law. But within those constraints, really push them, as Sam was saying, like how hard can students hit the bounding boxes that I'm providing for them, and how well how effectively can they synthesize those ideas together. And this also hit an important element of critical thinking. I wanted the students to be able to see how one compositional principle could or could not work with one Gestalt law or property. So they'd have to evaluate and decide if this would work or if it wouldn't work, and then kind of go back to the drawing board again to see if they could find something that was more effective. Craftsmanship is very important at ArtCenter. Faculty really want students to hone in their medium, have a clear understanding of what this medium does and what it doesn't do. But for me, in this first term class, it was more important that the medium effectively get their content across. So they may not be the best draftsmen, but they might use a medium like collage to get this idea, this idea of Gestalt, of the sum of all parts don't equal the whole, across very well within the theme that they're working with. Equally, professional practice is very important, especially in the first term, for students to get a basis in understanding how important the crit process is to develop a discourse around their work, and the review process equally as well, because when we do this in a group, students can understand what is working effectively and what is not working effectively. Equally, it helps them learn how to speak explicitly in design terms. So it's not about, oh, well, this picture is cool or not. It's about how is it working effectively? And that's what we kind of push them towards, like what's working, what's not working, and how can I get my point across? So when I initially designed this assignment a few years ago, I never thought that students would take it in these kind of bizarre and interesting and fantastical directions, and equally, really delve deep into these concepts that they were passionate about. And I started to learn that these restrictions I was giving them allowed for a lot of complexity in their own thinking. So I have several majors here who come from very different backgrounds. They come from all around the world. ArtCenter is a big international school. And I wanted to frame each one with the specific Gestalt property of reification, which is to consider or represent something as a material or concrete thing. In other words, it attempts to provide a bridge between what is abstract and what is real. And I think that was very apropos for this discussion because compositional theory is very abstract. But these students really, to a high degree, achieved something that is not only real, but very tangible. So for the first image that you see on the right here is an interaction design student. And interaction design students typically are very more about the interactive user experience of digital products or environments and systems, and are not as interested in narrative. But this particular student wanted to delve deep into narrative, and he came up with this very humorous idea about a caveman's experience with extraterrestrial life. And so I said, okay, all right, I have no idea what this is going to look like, but let's see where this goes and where it takes you. So the student drew out this narrative over 12 compositions. They chose a very limited palette of just working with black and white and values. But the results were very surprising. In this particular example, the student paired reification with asymmetrical balance in a really effective manner by just utilizing the cloud forms to create the existence of a spaceship landing and a caveman kind of peering into this situation. The next examples, one on the left is from an advertising major who wanted to research and explore kind of haunted places and phenomenon. This tactic and concept was very successful in her compositions, as many of them kind of suspended belief in what you see in the picture plane. So what I really appreciate about her compositions is they were slower reads to understand. You don't see the emerging image so fast, right? The dark, ominous colors of the palette support the ideas of her concept, and then slowly you kind of see this home or this house coming in the foreground. The use of the burnt and dead trees as a tool to kind of create this house is kind of surprised me. And as I said before, is a slower read than most of them that kind of just hit you right away and you see the form and the figure. The work on the right is an illustration student who adopted a childhood folklore about an Aztec sun and war god that takes the form of a hummingbird. And there was limited material or images of this story already existing, which I really appreciate. I always kind of tell students, choose something that doesn't already have pre-existing imagery, because they're always influenced by that imagery if they kind of choose that topic. So I know this was a bit of a hurdle for them, but they really took it to some kind of fantastical directions and really incorporated what they were already a facility of embroidery and understanding of textile design that they are kind of already had in their arsenal, and felt the dynamic use of materials and collaged embroidery and paint was highly effective for the story. Additionally, the theory throughout the compositions was applied very well, and the high saturated color kind of brought life to very static images. The pairing here I have is a fine art student and a graphic student. And I put them together because fine art and graphic students have this amazing way of synthesis and critical thinking. They also are, I would say, subtractive workers. They always kind of break things down to the bare bones and only give you like the least amount of visual information. Whereas sometimes my experience with illustration majors, they want to give me too much information, and I kind of have to suss through and break down, where they're getting to. So the work on the left is the concept was African American hairstyles over the decades. When the student first brought this idea to my attention, I thought the imagery might be a bit derivative. I was very familiar with this. This was something very close to home. However, their facility of critical thinking and synthesis was remarkable. They worked with not just the hair, but also the equipment that processed the hair over the 12 compositions. And they surpassed my expectations in kind of using the discrete use of elements and applied them to the theory as well. The graphic designer on the right took a very organic concept and also a very personal one, kind of thinking about moments of happiness and wanted to actualize them across 12 compositions. And through several meetings, I kept asking them, well, how are we going to understand this is happiness? Like, how are you going to work with, because initially the things were in black and white. And I said, you really want to use color to kind of emphasize these moments and the things of sensitivity. And I think it was quite successful once color entered the compositions and the strategic placement of elements to create this idea about fall in this particular image. It's a sweet sentiment. And they did a wonderful job in kind of creating those moments throughout the composition, especially with color as well. The next iterations are from another advertising student, and then on the right, an illustration student. And the advertising student built a little mini campaign around this. So she was very passionate about this endangered wild cat in Taiwan. She's from Taiwan, and jungle cat. And she wanted some way to promote the cat within her art, but then also she turned around and then after she'd made the art and tried to sold a few pieces to raise money for the cause, which I thought was really incredible to kind of take it a whole nother place after the class. I felt the use of foliage and mice in this particular one to create the contours was an exciting way to create synthesis of concept, to bring the environment of the cat into the design. Additionally, she took this design and made a wonderful kind of surface design of it for her process book, which was quite successful. The composition on the right gets a bit more complex and reductive, but equally has this fascinating theme of a monster market. And I was unclear about what this monster market was going to come into or look like, but their different use of bulk foods reminded me of the many night markets that I've toured around the world. And her theme was kind of an exciting mix of international cuisine and science fiction. I was pleasantly surprised with the results here. So at the end of the term, the students culminate by putting all of their coursework together. And looking back, what I found most interesting about this assignment that I was kind of taking you through about the solutions is the student's ability to take the constraints of compositional theory and push those boundaries to various limits while continuing to achieve the learning outcomes. Now, it's also important to note that some of my students come straight from high school and they're 18 years old, and other students have had other degrees or even other lives, and I get them at 28 years old and 32 years old. So when I get when I have an 18-year-old and a 40-year-old student in the classroom, the synergy that happens between them and the excitement within this excitement or assignment and how they bounce off each other really help support student learning. So you can see in this slide that the black and white pieces on the left is the first assignment they get prior to the more kind of complex and intricate assignment I'm talking to. And it's limited. It's geometric shapes, and there's only a few solutions to make to come to like a correct solution. The results of the first assignment are formulaic, like I said, And I've included this work because I felt it was kind of an explicit example of how students take abstract concepts and make them concrete and tangible images. Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Thank you so much, Joshua. And just love how you really showed us both the range, the complexity, and what I'm still so astounded by is not just how you're able to teach with such depth to students from so many different departments, but how the students themselves took a similar concept around composition and it really pushed it in so many different directions. Wonderful to see. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next panelist is David Tillinghast from the Illustration Design Department. David, you are up. Perfect.
Excellent. Can you see my screen there, Sam? Super. Thank you. So, hi everyone. I'm David Tillinghast. I've been teaching at the college for about 16 years. And I'm really going to pursue this idea of difference in terms of the way I deal with it within the illustration department, within a specific area within the illustration department. And just for those of you who may not be familiar with a traditional illustration program, it usually teaches drawing and painting skills, craft, visual problem solving skills, like you see exhibited in this painting, which is a 4-foot square painting in oil by a mid-curriculum student. But a lot of illustration programs have really evolved beyond that. That means that they're taking a lot of the fundamental skills that we train, and they're really looking to see how they can push those boundaries and really explore their own unique point of view. This is a good case in point. This is by the same student at graduation level, and they wanted to explore surfboard and imagery, and they're encouraged to learn how to learn new skill sets. In this case, found a mentor to help learn how to shape a surfboard, design it, seal it, and complete the image with it so that it's actually a complete finished product. So my process when I walk into a classroom here is that I need to figure out how I can help the students discover these unique differences within themselves, their unique points of view, and nurture it. But at the same time, I have to prepare them for the rigors of the professional marketplace when they graduate, because I teach at that level too. It's a little like a bus moving in two directions, to be honest with you, but it certainly can be done. So it's these two things. How do I nurture their difference? And how do I prepare them for what's ahead? So I'm going to show that to you by looking at two different courses, one at the mid-curricular level, one at the senior capstone level. And in these two courses, I'm going to introduce this through a class called Illustration Design Lab. This is at the 5th term level. So when they come into this course, they've come from foundation level. That means they've completed their basic skills. They've taken Design 1, as Joshua was just talking about in the first term, but they've also learned their drawing and their painting and their craft skills. And at this moment, I need to begin shaping their work so that it looks like professional work. And also, I need to encourage that individual difference. So when they come in, I am really faced with those two ideas. How do I tend to shape these differences? The first thing I'm generally faced with when they put their work up on the board is I ask them, say, so what do you think the strongest work on the board is? And they'll pick something out and they'll say, well, I like it. And I'll say, that's fabulous. I like it too, but can you tell me why? And at that point begins the conversation of the course, because that's usually met with silence. And we start to build a vocabulary. We're moving away from a subjective, completely subjective judgment to more of a professional understanding of what are the fundamentals at play here that make for strong image making, because that's what I want them to take away from this class, along with an understanding of what makes them unique. And this is all about focusing on creativity, design, and industry professional standards. And this is really what Sam was talking about with the parameters of learning. This is the through line. And that through line is something that I call the class model. The class model is 4 questions I ask about image making, and they answer the questions and I facilitate, which means I hear their answer and I'll say, I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. It's a little more Socratic. Can you say it another way? And we get to a point where we define some very clear ideas. Now, you don't need to read all of these. what I want you to focus on is that third one in the lower right-hand corner that says, what makes a powerful image? And that makes its way into the grading rubric. And that is up in the upper left-hand corner. There's a lot of other things we talk about: professionalism, craft, design, type, etc. But by focusing on this area, what you can see is they break fundamentals of image making down into 6 different ideas here. I will warn you, this is incredibly simplistic when you first look at it, but it's highly effective in the classroom. So part of these are touching on some fundamental design skills that seem to be the basis that they absolutely must touch. Value, which means a full range of value from light to dark, and visual hierarchy, orchestration of scale, full range of small to large, also tells the viewer where they're supposed to look, and it creates a great sense of theater and drama. Orchestration of color, actually, we limit it to 1 to 4 hues because it automatically pushes them into a color scheme. Editing skills, less is more. Joshua mentioned that illustration students tend to throw everything in they can, and unfortunately the communication becomes very muddled. And so I am going back to design basics to say less is more, which is a Bauhaus idea from the 1930s. The more that you remove, the clearer your message becomes. You just make sure you remove everything but what is essential. Originality and creativity, it's about surprise. Joshua mentioned that several times. It's about the unexpected. It is about the unpredictable. It is about the unique. It's about seeing something that you haven't seen before. And we really boil it down to something very simple called surprise the viewer. That's our definition of creativity. And finally, engagement. They have to be engaged, having a good time, not just turning in an assignment, but committed, engaged with what they're doing over every square inch of the image. And this can be a big challenge to get them to the engagement level. But once I do, many of these things tend to take care of themselves because they've really been trained in them previously. So just to take a look at this, these are these 6, when you look at them, again, they look overly simplistic, but the truth is what we're talking about here are some 6 very major points in terms of how to create a powerful image. This is an example of an image. They create over 100 images in the class. They can create images about anything they want. So as long as they're exploring these basic ideas, there's no restrictions on subject matter, no stylistic restrictions. They can be abstract, representational, they can be colorful, they can be moody, they can be mysterious, they can be about nature, they can be about spirituality, they can be about anything as long as they hit those 6 points. And what happens out of that space, like Sam showed with the room, hitting the walls as hard as you can, we push them to create unexpected, surprising solutions. But as long as those walls, those 6 parameters I just showed you, they remain within those, they create work like this. This just appeared in the new annual of Graffi's posters, and this is student work. The student hasn't graduated yet, so he's producing work at a very professional and award-winning level. And I'm just going to break down one of these posters because I want to be aware of time with those 6 points so you can see how they approach this. So when they put up an image like this and they're going to turn it into a real world poster, it hits the points in this way. It has a good value range in which I can see everything very clearly, light to dark. It has a great range of shapes from positive to negative to large to small, even the way the rectangles are broken up. It has great limited color. They've limited to cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And so there are only 4 hues. And at the same time, they have eliminated a lot of extraneous information. As a matter of fact, you have to slow down a little bit to read the image. Now, this particular image was going to be a solution for a skating exhibition, for a skateboard exhibition, rather. And so this student, rather than doing the predictable, which would be to do a drawing or a painting of someone skateboarding, they actually decided to make a sculpture. It's made out of Sculpey, which is a very unexpected, non-traditional art material, and created a abstracted figure of a skateboarder in motion. So it has the sense of motion about it. He then took a photograph of it, moved the photo into Photoshop where it glitched, liked the glitch art, because the glitch added another layer of a sense of contemporary quality, because skateboarding culture, of course, for youth is a very contemporary, edgy kind of pursuit. So when you put all these together, you have a nice level of surprise with this image. It does not look like any other image you've ever seen for a skateboarding exhibition. It makes the viewer think. It has all of the elements, and it looks like he had a hell of a good time. All 6 points, we love it. Gets a home run, as I like to say in the class. And all of these images tend to do that in one way or another. This is to Joshua's point about less is more. This is about as boiled down as it gets, but everything is there to communicate the message. And again, with this collage poster, this using a thrown away toy with a photograph and drawing on top of it to talk about this abandoned toys auction. So each one of these in some sense brings something that's unexpected. This is a yearbook photo which they painted on and then created type with to communicate the project. So these become a portfolio project. As you can see, we talk about the differences. These are illustration students using everything in their visual toolkit. They don't have to just draw and paint. They can use anything to create surprising, unexpected solutions, and we encourage that. So finally, what I'd like to show you with this is the way that a finished poster like this, and this is an analog hand-done painting, is then placed in the real-world environment. And this is in preparation for the capstone class that I'm going to show you in a second, because this places it convincingly in the real world where it should be. That leads me to the capstone course. This is Portfolio Design Lab. And in this course, the students have to edit their work. They have to choose their career paths. They have to build a career strategy. And they have to present their work to industry as what is called our grad show. And this is in our pavilion. And this is a photo of that grad show. And through those terms between the mid-curricular level and the graduation level, they've been exposed to a lot of possibilities for career paths. And never is there more variety than in the possibilities of what illustration students can do with their career, as long as they're supported to believe that with these differences, they can make any path that they want for themselves. So as you can see here, this student that works in a very flat graphic voice is applying it to children's books, adult trade books on the right with Jurassic Park, packaging on the left, advertising with the posters. So they really approach a full range. So the spine of this class, though, is something called a market research presentation. And this really challenges their research skills as well as their presentation skills. And in this, they lay out their career strategy. They connect the dots with who the clients are that they're going to go after. They also research who the people are, what the names are, their contact information, email addresses, and they build a real thorough presentation over 14 weeks, including where they might want to move to, or where other offices are that they could contact. And I want to finish up just showing you how some of these students end up in the real world by going through this program that supports so many differences. This is Bijou Carmen. She's a freelance editorial illustration with an emphasis on fashion, which is her particular point of view and interest. And of course, freelance illustrators work as independent contractors working out of their own studios. They do things like magazine covers in the editorial industry, newspaper illustrations as well. And as you can see, the differences between these viewpoints is what's really stunning. And they bring it to such a high level as long as they have this supporting structure of this shared class model. This is Brianna Harden. This is her sitting in her office in Manhattan. She's an art director at Penguin Books. And this is Demetrius May on the left, handing it up for the camera. That shirt that he is in, he actually designed that shirt and the logo that's on it, working for a clothing company after graduation. And on the right is where he works now, which is a branding creative director at Nike in Portland, Oregon. So I think what you should be struck by here is the diversity of the career paths and these voices and the way they can end up when they're supported. This is some of his work. The bottle in the middle is a packaging for a cologne, again, unexpected solutions. They also pursue entrepreneurial pursuits. This is Jaya Nicely and her magazine Compound Butter. It's a food magazine. She launched it just before graduation. It includes graphic design, photography, and illustration, and writing. She's the art director, she's the designer, she's one of the writers, and she illustrates for it. That is the magic of supporting all of these differences to me that I find personally exciting. She launched this magazine before graduation, and last year it was selected as one of the 10 best food magazines in the United States for last year, which is pretty impressive. To even go farther afield, stretch things a little more, this is Caitlin Hill on the right. She studied through the traditional illustration program, and she decided to pursue her original dream, which was to redesign the swimwear for the ocean warrior, as she calls it, the athlete. She was an athlete since birth in San Diego. These suits she started designing, the actual suit, not just a prototype before graduation. They're made out of neoprene, and she's very successful and runs this business with her team of friends out of San Diego, California. Children's books are also supported, a very traditional pursuit. And lately we've had a lot of success with graduates that are not only illustrating their own books, but authoring them as well. And that is a real departure from what was possible before in a traditional illustration program. So I think what you really see here is the way that, given this substructure to support them, the walls that Sam was talking about, if they really push for what is unique about them and are allowed to really explore that with a lot of support from faculty in the department, they can come up with stunning results, and they can pursue them in a wide range of different careers. And that is my presentation, and I want to thank you very, very much.
Thank you, David. That was wonderful. And I think between you and Joshua, really what I see is a clear sense of how there's a very specific concrete starting point in a way. And then all of a sudden it broadens out so immediately as the students are moving in so many different directions. What is really interesting is, especially as you see them at a midpoint and toward the end, is where they're really kind of finding their voice in the middle and starting to apply it. And then really kind of thinking about their professional career and making sure that they're pointed toward that with the work that they're doing as well. I'm just thinking of the shared challenge already we're seeing is both of you have students, in one case from multiple majors, and in another case, students who are headed towards totally different areas of the profession, yet the learning outcome's similar. The way you are teaching in some ways is very similar to how you get the students to really achieve and produce. Voice is essential in this, but another incredibly key component is the idea of process, which is how each student figures out their own individual method. So anybody who has had to learn and apply or do something in a way that may be different than someone has shown them, it will definitely understand what I'm talking about. To really make this clear, though, I'm going to turn it over to our third panelist, Wendee Lee from our product design department, who, as I said earlier, also has a very deep focus on student support, student resources, and student success.
Thank you, Sam. Let's see. Oops. Okay, we'll just go with that. So my name is Wendee Lee. I teach in the product design department. I'm an alum of ArtCenter, and I've been teaching for about 14 years. I teach classes where the students have to talk about themselves and not just about their work. So one of the challenges that I have is the students are very comfortable talking about their work. They have to present their work weekly through 14 weeks. But when we ask them, how do you talk about what you do, that's a little bit of a different challenge. So I'm going to present my case study of an assignment that I give that has the students look at their project journey maps. And I'll talk a little bit about how it fits into our curriculum. So I think you've heard from Joshua and David that we really support the idea of individual student voice at ArtCenter. I took a look at the original catalog from when the school started in 1931. And one of the comments was that the instructors are really focused on helping the students toward their personal expression. And the product department, when we talk about the student work, It's not so much about, of course, we have them talk about their work, but it's always about process. Tell me how you made your decisions, and we don't talk about a process or the ArtCenter process, but the question that we ask is, tell me about your process. So in the product design department, and if you're not familiar, product design is your video camera, your shoes, the things that are in your office, the washing machine, your shoes, a lot of systems as well, user interaction. We spend the first 2 years in our curriculum having the students learn the foundational skills, and then the last 2, the students are able to focus on specialties, either in those industries that I mentioned, industries like that, or in parts of the process like research or ideation or color material, manufacturing. And what I noticed was there are multiple points where we ask the students to define who they are. Of course, they have to generate resumes a couple times throughout their time at ArtCenter. There's a portfolio, which has become website-based. In addition to showing their particular process, we encourage them to express who they are in the visual personality and character of their websites, as well as the graphic elements that they include. One part of that also is the personal statement or their about me statement on their websites. And in our curriculum, we ask at least 3 or 4 times to have the students think about this. And the words we use are, what are you passionate about? What do you want to say with your voice? And have the students really think about their uniqueness in the field. So I teach a class called Internship Portfolio. It's a website that students build for themselves to showcase their work. And one of the course learning outcomes is that they analyze and frame their projects to convey their design process so that we can understand their decision points and the achievements of their projects. As you can imagine, and listening to Joshua and David, there's a high expectation for finish of the result at the end of the projects. There's also expectation for professionalism. And also, I mentioned the students will present their work week by week. So when I ask the students in my class, tell me about your project, oftentimes what I would get in the beginning was their process books. They would take all of the work that they've done, all of the things that they put on the wall week by week, collate it into a book, and say, here, this is what I do, and we'd go through it. What I found was there's such a high expectation for finish that the students would only talk about their project and not talk about themselves as part of this journey. So a couple of years ago, I said, okay, we need to have conversations about what values do you have? How are they presenting themselves in what you're doing? What do you do well? What makes you unique as a product designer? To really put the focus on them. And I said, okay, you're going to get get a piece of paper out, get a pen out, and we're going to have you create journey maps for your project, your first project for your website. So create a starting point. That's your design brief, your prompt. Put an end point. Some point on paper is where we have our finished object that you're going to tell me about, and draw the journey. Help me understand where your decision points were, how you made your decisions, and then we can use that as a starting point to have these conversations, to dig deeper into who they are as product designers and to talk about their process. So I want to say these sketches were never meant to be turned in or thought to be finished sketches. What I found was it allowed me to see how the students thought about their process, the steps that they go through. We can see it tries to be linear, but there are a lot of iterative processes which we expect. We can see where the students going back and forth in their thinking. But what was really exciting about it was the expressive quality in the drawings that came out that I wasn't quite expecting. So again, we can see across the top the steps that the student went through. If you were to say it was a linear process, and then in the green, they're saying this is the actual path that I took. And we can see where the struggles were, where they had to go back and forth. And what emerged was these little narrative editorial statements that would show up. So here, the student is talking about, I usually get stuck about here. And I could have a conversation with him. Is that part of your process? Like to know that you're going to get stuck? Or are you commenting that this is something that you don't do well, and you would like to focus on other areas when you look for work to talk about the things that you do well in your process. What I noticed too was the expressiveness in the lines, to really start to read beyond just the words, beyond just the flow of the project. So here I'm adding the little red circles, red ovals. We can see that the 2 weeks of research felt different for the student than some of the other steps in their project. And for sure, they were really excited about the making process. And hey, the final design is something to celebrate. So we can see there's a sense of emotion that started to show up in the journey maps for the projects. Again, we can see for this student, we can really get a sense of where they struggled or where the process was a little bit messy. And this allows us to acknowledge that in portfolios where everything is expected to be very clean and very straightforward. Sometimes it's more important to understand the challenges that people face and how they got through it. And also here, the students talking about the design direction was not good, and to recognize that and say, what did you do to overcome that challenge, to get to a better design direction? So this student, if you look at the process from the start all the way to the finish, it would appear to be a direct path, pretty straightforward, but he added commentary on his drawing, much more bold than the process itself, was to say, in his class during the semester, he received critique and had to rebuild everything at every step. And so for me, this allows the conversation about, what did you learn? What did you learn about yourself? What did you learn about what you can do? And I don't know that I would have been able to see that without asking for this kind of work. So what I've learned by doing the project journey maps, they are much more expressive when they're done by hand. The students that do them as Illustrator sketches tend to be more focused on the quality of the sketch, and they show their process to be much more linear. I enjoy the spontaneity of the sketches, and that's what we do in product design. So the students are comfortable with it, but I do see a lot more expression in them. This also allows us to talk about the project as a whole. We can see the journey of the whole project on one sheet, as opposed to 40, 50, 60 sheets in a process book. And it also allows us to talk about it without assessing the quality of the design. We are very visual people, and if we have a piece of work in front of us, we are going to start to analyze it and critique it. And so by using the sketches, we can have conversations about the projects without actually looking at them. And that seems to help quite a bit. These are meant to be support conversations, so they are not actually critiques of work. So the students can be a little bit more free, I think, and express their emotion that they experience through the project. It allows us to understand, if we really look carefully, it allows us to understand how the foundational structure that the student is trying to say, the process that they followed, and then the actual path through that they went through. And again, it allows the students to convey emotional components of their project journey. And for sure, if we are trying to support individual expression, there's an emotional component in design as well as art, of course. The students put a lot of themselves into that, and this helps me to support the conversations about themselves and their process. So one of the things I've been thinking about, how can we expand this? And one of the questions that came up a couple days ago was, how do we embed this, foster practice, a reflection? So one of the things that I'd like to do is to have the students do this for all of their project classes. There are 8 semesters that the students attend ArtCenter. They do a major product project in each semester. So there are 8 projects at least in their portfolio when they graduate. It'd be great to have them think about it in this way, to think about their process for all of their projects. I am going to start to explicitly or subtly ask them to talk about how they felt going through the project, to get a sense of where to ask the questions, where to have a conversation about what they're learning. And it would be great at graduation to have a whole collection of these journey maps, and then to have the student talk about their practice as a collection of their project processes. So that I was really excited to have the chance to share this. It's a little bit of the behind the scenes work that we do to help the students. I think you hear from my colleagues how much we dedicate to the conversations that we have. And I found that this is one way to support those conversations. So thanks.
Thanks, Wendee. I made a note to myself about one of the questions you asked in there, which was, what did you learn about yourself in this experience? It actually reminded me that going through my entire formal education, I think I may have been asked once, if that at all, who was I as a learner? How did I learn best? What was my approach? What was my way? It's what I always tried to do, but and I gravitated toward people that allowed me or created space in the work for me to do this. But the fact that you're really basing your entire class and the way you're forming your projects on helping students figure out their process, how they approach it, and also that socio-emotional component of how they feel about it, even knowing that they may get to a solution, a project, a design that works, and still have some feelings, residual feelings, maybe sort of excitement moving forward, or a sense of, oh, I could have done this differently. So actually really putting the students in a place where they have to both reflect on their work and also their process. Just wonderful. Thank you so much. We are heading towards our final panelist, and we are going to have some time toward the end for Q&A. So I just encourage everybody, if you have any questions for any of the panelists individually or just in general, please do feel free to use the chat. We'll take a look at the chat as we open up Q&A. So if you want to drop questions in there now, or once we do open for Q&A, we do want to hear from you all, and would love to respond with some of our thoughts. Our final panelist, Armando Zuniga, is from the Humanities and Sciences Department. He's the Director of English Language Learning, and somebody who also comes to the college with deep personal practice, professional practice in English language development, English language learning and teaching. And I would also say, Armando, you are an educational designer in many ways. as you are figuring out how to apply what you do into a new environment, simultaneously helping the students figure out how to both acquire language and reach their professional goals. A repeated idea, I think, across the panel is how each of us is really working directly with students or our constituents on multiple objectives simultaneously, but often sitting at the intersection of what do you want to do personally, individually, and also where are you headed professionally, or what are your goals and objectives? And in that middle space, how can I or we as faculty members or administrators help? Armando, please take it away. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. As Sam mentioned, I'm the person on the panel that's not an artist or a designer. My background is more in language acquisition theory and English language development. But the role that I play really is, I think you'll see, coheres with what we're doing at the college and with what my colleagues are doing. I wanted to talk to you really today. My portion of the presentation is essentially, like Sam outlined, a little bit about designing, but not designing in the traditional sense that happens at ArtCenter College of Design, but instructional design. When I first started at the college, I realized the importance of instructional design and the approach that it was necessary when it comes to working with students that didn't have English as a first language. One of the documents that I used to help structure and develop the English language development program at ArtCenter College of Design was this document that really talks about the what and how of teaching in instructional design. If you'll excuse me for one moment, I'm going to move this slide just a second so that you can see the whole thing. I think it's probably better this way. I don't know what it looked like on your screen, but you can kind of see full engagement in the courses of my colleagues really requires a facility with the language, with the English language, and an ability to navigate in and out of those complex language demands, whether it be the critique, the presentation, the brainstorming, the creating of ideas, or even the social networking that happens in the classroom. Beyond that, the language demands are huge once they leave the college. And I think you saw from my colleagues' presentations, the places that many of our students land and the spaces that they go to are really diverse, and having a facility of the language of art and design, but also of an academic English is really important for them to be successful. The program that I've been working to create since I started at the college a few years ago really tries to get those complex language demands and embed them within the instructional sequences of the curriculum. The instruction is parallel and symbiotic to the content area courses that they're taking, whether it's David's, Wendee's, or Joshua's classes. I try to provide them with the language skills that would transfer for their success in those classes. It was important for me to visualize language instruction that was parallel and symbiotic to those courses for students to be successful. And this approach was a little different for me with a traditional academic background in language acquisition. And it's a real departure from a lot of programs that currently exist that are mainly embedded with kind of the traditional focus on language learning, which is kind of repetitive drill and sometimes even void of context. The language learning instruction that happens at ArtCenter, or that we're trying to create and make sure happens at ArtCenter, is one that really provides language that's contextualized around art and design, that provides them with the language demands and the skills necessary for them to be successful in communicating the sophistication and the complexity of their art and design work on a social level, but also on an academic level, on a presentation level, and those projects that that you saw many of those projects that my colleagues presented today. It's similar to traditional language programs in the way that it does exist to provide students with the language needed to express the complexity of their thoughts and ideas and communicate them through projects like those presented to my colleagues. that moves them up and through higher levels of traditional educational, like Bloom's taxonomy or the rigor and relevance scale, to have them express those ideas and their thinking along those ideas. So I'm really looking at the language they need to be successful in those areas, but I'm also looking at how they're delivered. And that's this slide here, this framework. When we're moving to try to continue our language instruction online, and this really applies for face-to-face models as well, we looked at a document that Sam's office created, and that was the what and how of teaching. What my colleagues are teaching those other departments is new content and the delivery of new skills, asking students, as you could see in many of the projects, they required a lot of collaboration and teamwork, a lot of activating those new skills and activating the new content that they learned, and several projects and presentations. But how to get there now in an online and remote teaching environment makes us really examine how we help them and what skills what supports we provide through online and remote teaching. Are we providing student-centered learning? Are we addressing issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion? And are we using the appropriate educational technology and software to help them achieve those goals across the top, the new content and the collaboration, not getting lost in the technology for technology's sake? All that while keeping in mind that English language acquisition and English language development are part and parcel of the what and the how as we plan instruction in the English language development department. To give you an idea of that, I wanted to tell you what our program is kind of built on. We're really grounded in research and effective practices that are very traditional in a lot of ways, but we're doing it in a comprehensive English language development program that's not just providing students with the language that they need to be successful in the humanities and science courses that are more of the academic side of the college. And I'm not saying sides in terms of there's two different sides. I'm saying in terms of the focus. And then we're also trying to provide them, like I said earlier, those effective language skills that you might think are necessary after seeing the presentations you did for my colleagues today, to be successful in those art and design courses. So this is how we approach the building of the English language development program, and we approach language acquisition and all of the courses for international students and for students who are English only speaking students who might be struggling with academic language. It's really focused on the 4 domains of language, which I think, again, if I refer back to my colleagues' presentations, you'll see that students really require a facility in the English language, both in an academic sense and in a content-specific sense, with the language of art and design, and an ability to listen carefully to their critiques, to their partners, to their instructors, an ability to speak, whether it be formal in a presentation or informally, as they're brainstorming or collaborating, an ability to read a lot of information as they research and look for answers to and find solutions towards existing problems, and then write the written portion of the art and design that is necessary for them to communicate effectively what their solutions are. So we really try to ground it in listening, speaking, reading, and writing, but again, wrapped in the context of art and design and the skills they need to be successful in those courses. Again, that brings me to number 3. All of the instruction is contextualized to meet the specific language demands across the curriculum. And so while many of the skills that they would need in a traditional English class do transfer to humanities and sciences, we do try to keep an eye and be reflective when we teach on how these courses are also supplying them with the language skills, techniques, and strategies really that they'll need to be successful in art and design. For humanities and sciences, the language demands at our college are heavy in writing. Many papers are due in the humanities and sciences courses, and lots of writing is done. There's a large quantity of reading in our humanities and sciences courses, and these could be a generalization for many humanities and sciences courses at many colleges. But I'm being true to the presentation here in saying that I've assessed all of the humanities and sciences courses and really looked at the way that they deliver their presentations and found this is where the emphasis really are. And many of the discussions, while not necessarily a lot of formal presentations are happening in our humanities and sciences departments at this time, I found that there are a lot of discussion-based meaning-making sessions happening. In other words, students have read an article, they have seen a presentation, a video, or reviewed a document or an illustration or a chart or a diagram, and now have been given opportunities by the instructor in humanities and sciences to make meaning of it together, whether that be in pairs, as partners, or in small groups. And those are the language demands that I found heavily in the humanities and sciences department. And those are the language demands that within the ELD program, we try to have students achieve and acquire as we work with them towards learning English. When we look at the art and design language demands, and you can probably see these a little bit more clearly now after looking at the presentations that my colleagues did, there's an emphasis on listening and speaking a lot, whether, again, that's through the brainstorming process, or whether that's through the ideation process, whether that's one-on-one between instructor and student, whether that's in small groups as they work together to try to make meaning of something, or in critique formally. There's also a lot of listening and speaking going on during formal presentations. Large quantity of discussion, and we try to emulate that in the ELD program by providing students with opportunities to have informal discussion around things that they make meaning of, but even social discussions around topics that might seem a little bit benign, but they are really trying to get them to learn those skills necessary for communicating effectively with partners and communicating ideas effectively in large groups. There's a large quantity of discussion-based meaning making in both humanities and sciences and in our art and design courses. And as such, we try to provide opportunities with that across the range of our English language development and English language learner courses. This is just a thumbnail overview of the architecture of the program. Of course, embedded within all of this are our formative and summative assessments, the way we check for progress monitoring using formative assessment results, the way we place students using an entrance exam, and the way that our instructors also use multiple measures of assessments to ensure that students are, in fact, moving along that language continuum and moving towards proficiency in an English that isn't going to be just academic, but of course an English that's going to help them be successful in their art and design courses and beyond as they move into companies like Nike or into designing book covers at Penguin. That was my portion of the presentation. I'm trying to be respectful of time and honor the time that I want to give back to you for any questions and that you might have for the panel. So thank you very much for allowing me to share a brief sketch of our program. And I hope that this was a good use of your time and informative.
Thank you, Armando. Thank you, everyone on the panel. I think a lot of repeated ideas across the board in a way, the focus on individual voice, expression, really thinking about some of these challenges of how we meet our students where they are and help them get to a place where we want to be able to see what they're able to show in terms of ability, at the same time, specifically through their lens, their lived experience, through their own ideas. And this group of faculty particularly work unbelievably hard to help the students achieve success in their own ideas, which is one of the particular reasons I asked each of them to think about presenting a case study. Armando, you have a very particular challenge in what I would refer to as the meta teaching that many of us have to engage in, where not only English language acquisition, English language development, but vocabulary specific to the multiple different departments the students are heading into. And inside of that is this core idea I think a lot of us do share, which is language, whether it's visual communication or oral communication language-based, as a means for self-expression. And with this secondary purpose of making sure that the students are able to do this personally, individually, and also to a professional level, to a professional standard, and in a way that will help them professionally and succeed. We do have several minutes left for some Q&A, so I would love to open it up at this point for any questions. Please feel free to use the chat. Also, I think we did get a note earlier. To those of you who want, we encourage you to turn on your videos, and please feel free to jump in if you want to unmute your mic. I think you all have the ability now. So we do have about 8 minutes or so for some questions. So we are here. Please ask away. Harry, please.
Yeah, so thanks everybody. I think I posted a question just a little bit before, just on in terms of the assessment rubrics that you're using, and whether or not that's something that has proved problematic in terms of using developmental language, or just curious to see what your views are on those approaches to learning and assessment.
Thank you, Harry. I think one of the, I'm scrolling back now and seeing your question in regards to my statement. I'm not familiar with the article that you sent, but my colleague did mention about some of the language of like using emerging, expanding, and bridging terms in terms of like the assessment. And I guess I'm happy and open to looking at those. But my understanding for my students is terms of like using language that's measurable, that like I can connect and link and say, okay, if it's, you know, only, and I think I have some numbers in terms of like the benchmarks in which they're hitting for certain compositions, right? So if they're only hitting 3 to 4 of the compositional principles or ideas, I have that in there. But I like, you know, I think what you said is important, because sometimes if you're using, there's certain languages you might be using in education for students that actually shuts down their ability to learn because the language is too negative or critical for the development. So I'm happy and excited to look into that, but that's kind of my response to your question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm involved in the teaching of critical thinking, and it's equally a challenging area to try and capture the kinds of competencies through the descriptors that we put in place. But one of the things I found really useful with the strategies, the developmental approaches that's favoured here at the Melbourne Graduate School of Education, is avoiding the, for example, comparative terms. And one of the ways that we've been instructed to do that is by replacing adjectives and adverbs, for instance, through the use of verbs. So what is it that a student has to make, do, say, or write that evidences or that leads me to say that this artwork is, you know, balanced or whatever it might be. So, but I've just found it particularly useful in my area. Yeah. So thanks.
Thank you, Harry. It's rubrics, I think, are an interesting topic in the college itself, partly because it's something on the back end we use a lot for assessment, but really the idea of giving it to the students in a way that makes the objectives transparent, that allows for real sort of a formative and summative feedback along the journey itself, giving the students the area or the criteria in a sense in advance allows them also to be able to check in on their own work and their own progress and start to take a little more command of it. What we struggle with a lot is the idea of taking what is inherently subjective and making it as objective as possible. And that's how we gravitated toward the tool. But thank you for the tips. It's something we are constantly in a state of reviewing and evolving our own practices. So.
In a parallel thought, Harry, it's also important, and I think you alluded to this, that you teach the rubric as well, right? Like that it's not this thing that just exists, and it exists because, you know, institutionally it's required, or institutionally you're supposed to have this as part of your syllabus. But I think I can speak for everyone on the panel that the rubric isn't something that we hand out along with the grade. I think it's really something that's taught along with the assignment. And I think that's really important. And from the language standpoint, for me, it's very important that I teach what those things mean. So like you said, you moved into verbs instead of adjectives, but what do those verbs mean, and what do they look like in terms of this assignment in this class, and really show representative or illustrative examples of what those look like to make sure that there's meaning there, and that the rubric exists not as a tool for me to grade, but as a tool for them to plan and build effectively.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, that that the rubrics can be used to scaffold students so they can assist in co-constructing them. For instance, if we know what criteria we want them to use, and they can be involved in that process, and that assists, I think, in bringing to the fore their metacognitive thinking. So it's exactly what you were talking, I think, before in your presentation.
An interesting process some of our faculty are really actively engaging in now is defining loosely in terms of the criteria for the project, but actually allowing the definition specifically of that criteria for that particular class to emerge organically, to be co-created with the students, with the class, in a sense where we have ownership and relevancy almost immediately from day one.
And I can just speak to that for a second. I know in the class, the mid-curricular class I was talking about, I work with the students to help them define what it is that makes for really strong imagery. And once they come up with that construct, I use that language in talking about their work in the first half of the class, but then I start stepping back and I wait for them to say, okay, I want you to talk about this with the language you've been using in the class. Let's talk about this critically. And before long, by the time I'm at about week 9 or 10, they're actually leading the class critiques. I just stand in the back and I facilitate, which is a pretty cool feeling to see them actually actively engaging that. And that language comes directly from the rubric, but it originated with the students in the classroom and their thinking. That's pretty exciting.
I think that also reflects in the socio-emotional well-being of the students as well, right? Because coming in, especially to an art and design school where many of their professors are very accomplished in their fields, there's already this positionality between instructor and student that can be unbalanced, right? But allowing them to participate actively in the creation of what the outcomes might be and what a successful outcome is really kind of creates that environment that is more engaging for students and really puts them on parity rather than in this hierarchical kind of change. And it's not using the rubric as a blunt instrument as many of us have seen before.
Thank you, Armando. Thank you, everyone. A very terrific question and comments as well. I think we have reached the end of our time allocated for the panel. I have a feeling we could definitely go on and on, as a lot of us really love to talk about what we do. But I really very specifically want to thank the panelists, my colleagues, for taking the time to step back for a second and reflect on their own practice. We're so embedded deeply in what we do daily that it sometimes is a great opportunity and also a particular challenge to both identify what you do as a deep aspect of your own practice, your own teaching, and be able to turn and offer that introspectively to others. Also, I know we're on California time. We're all wrapping a very busy teaching or working day. So thank you again to the panelists also for making the time for this. And for all of you in attendance, thank you for joining. We hope you got something out of this in terms of how applied teaching and learning and the idea of ownership and relevance can really be created through a framework or a structure in a sense that the students pick up, carry, live through, and move on in a way that becomes their own. Armando and I will be presenting again in a few days at a workshop. I encourage all who are interested to attend that. And a big thank you to Joe and the rest of the IAFOR team for having us.